This is the last little section of Chapter 2. So the last piece, so in Chapter 2 we talked about property rights, the importance of property rights, why a property rights type of system works pretty well. We've talked about the incentives that are there. And then we talked about economic growth and production possibilities curve. And so the last little piece here is just to talk about different types of economic systems. Now, no country today has a perfect form of one or the other, right? Every country or government has some elements of both. But the basic idea of kind of the two dominant forms of economic activity today are what we call a market system. Now, this is what we have in the US and in most other countries today. And the other system is what we call collective decision-making, right? So collective decision-making would basically be communism or socialism, but this is where the economic choices are no longer made by individuals, they're made by governments, okay? So let's talk about a market economy first. So a market system or a market economy, which again is what most governments have these days, I shouldn't say governments, economies have these days, is a market system. So what does that entail? Well, it entails property rights, which we've talked about. It entails using prices to coordinate the actions of individuals. And it involves voluntary exchange. That is, everybody makes their own choices. So voluntary exchange means people are free to make their own choices. Make their own choices. Okay? Right. So that's the idea. We talked about in Chapter 1, scarcity. The fact there's scarcity, we have to make choices. When we make choices, there's opportunity cost, etc. Right. So in a market system, how do you kind of plan or figure everything out? Well, in a market system, we just leave it up to the individual. The individual is free to make their own choices. They get to decide where they want to go to school, where they want to live, where they want to work, what type of career they want to pursue. You know, that's where we allow individual freedom, okay? Now, a lot of times these days, this is also called capitalism. And the funny thing is that Karl Marx, when he originally kind of coined the phrase, meant it to kind of have a negative connotation, kind of be like kind of a bad word, a dirty word when it's talking about markets. And it stuck. And that's why even today, when people are disparaging a market system, a lot of times they'll use the term capitalism, right? And so he created it to kind of have a negative connotation, okay? But that's what we mean when we talk about a market system. It involves property rights, prices, and letting people be free to make their own choices, okay? All right, at the other end of the spectrum is what we call collective decision-making. That is, government is used to allocate resources and make economic decisions, okay? So in this type of system, there are no property rights. No property rights. There are no need for prices, or in Marxism, in communism, basically they talk about abolishing prices along with property rights. This ends up creating a problem because you need prices to figure out the value of things. But so communism or collective decision-making involves no property rights, right? No one can own anything, no prices, and basically no or little individual freedom. Individual, if I could spell it, individual okay. So in a market system, people make their own choices, but in a collective system, choices are made for you, right? So someone else decides where you go to school, where you live, where you work, these types of things, right? So you don't get the freedom to do that, okay? So generally this is called socialism or communism, and is basically where the state controls all the resources and the state makes economic choices, okay? So all economic decisions are made by a government or a planning board, okay? So those are kind of the two different extremes. A market economy, which basically has no decisions made by government. They're all made by the individual. And then you have collective decision making, which is generally communism or socialism, where the government or the state makes all decisions, right? And today most countries are somewhere in between, right? The United States, Canada, France, Germany, UK, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, right? All those kind of modern market economies are clearly more on the market economy spectrum, but they do have markets where governments intervene, right, with regulations, taxes, subsidies, price controls, all these things we're going to get into in Chapter 4. Many countries have those interventions, so that is moving towards kind of the collective decision-making thing, right, because that's government making these economic choices and not individuals, okay? So those are the two extremes. Markets and collective decision making in most countries are kind of somewhere along that spectrum.